I think on the marketing side, what's interesting to me is what's always been important to me from a marketing lens and the lens that I champion, which is I kind of say I'm actually not a marketer. I'm a strategist, and I'm also somebody who always felt much more comfortable on the product innovation side. And part of that being because to me it's about how do we tap into people's motivations as opposed to setting expectations.
Financial independence,
freedom,
financial picture,
independent financially,
financial future,
financial freedom and wealth,
financial independence.
Get your fill, financial independence and long life. Hello and welcome to another episode of Get Your Fill, Financial Independence and Long Life, where we explore ways to achieve those two goals. Amazing people come on to help us. And today, Kathy Oneto, which I know you told me how to pronounce your name. Did I do it right?
Oh, Kathy Oneto.
Oneto. See, I didn't do it right. Kathy Oneto is an executive and life work coach. She's a speaker and facilitator whose mission is to help ambitious organizers, teams, and individuals explore how to live and work differently for more success, satisfaction, and sustainability. She's also a strategy executive who bridges her two worlds, bringing strategic thinking to life and work planning and management. You're a person who does what we often can't do, which is to figure out, what should we do first and how are we going to make this work? And, this person's driving me nuts and how can I get along with everyone? And how can I make my life be more cool and streamlined and fun? And thanks for joining us, Kathy.
Of course, Christine. Thanks so much for having me. Well, and I say I don't have a magic wand. So if people are like expecting a magic wand to like me, give them a pill or something that they can take and like all of a sudden things are magically like fixed. Sorry, you're a human and you're operating in this world. And so it's messy.
Yep, exactly. But don't you find that like once you accept that everything's easier?
It is. And I think I just say that because part of what I'm offering is more of like a practice and a way of thinking about things to help us step into a little bit more joy, peace, and ease. At least that's my hope.
Perfect. So tell us more about that. How did you get interested in that?
I think I've been interested in this because it's what I've been, for whatever reason, this has been a thread that I've been following for my own life, all my life practically. And I think, I date myself by saying this, but that's okay, which is I started this way of thinking all the way back when I was starting to think about, well, what am I going to major in college? And I was sitting on the sofa and looking at a book, yes, a book, not a website, and flipping through and trying to see, well, what do I want to major in and what interests me and what path should I take? And, really the threads that end up in my book and the work I do around sustainable ambition and what I explore have been these threads that I've been exploring throughout my adult life around, well, what is success for me and what do I want to pursue? And, how do I invest time and energy both into my professional career as well as the personal things that I want to be doing? And I'm a naturally hard worker. And so it's kind of like, well, and how do I do that without killing myself and burning myself out? So, it's been a learning journey for me.
Well, and it's true. It's like a lot of us can read a book and say, oh, okay, I'm going to try this new program. I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to get it organized. But if you don't have that sustainability, right? If you don't have that thread that's going to keep you going and make this something that you can do every single day, then you get burnt out and you're like, well, that didn't work. And like, I did it for a month. It didn't work. And that's the end of it, and like, that's not how we find success, right? There's no persistence there. So how do you help people to kind of keep that energy level to a point where it can be sustainable?
That's a really good point. I think one of the things I want to pick up on, and then I'll answer your second question, which is this frustration that people can have, like, "Ooh, I fell off the wagon," if you will, right? Like, "Oh my gosh, it's kind," and I almost want to, just say that will happen. And just be prepared for that because it will happen because life happens to us. And then it takes awareness of that and pausing to kind of check in and then say, okay, let me revisit this. And what do I need to get back on track? Because it just happens. And so that's not to say, oh, the method doesn't work or this practice doesn't work. It's to say, that it is difficult to manage ourselves as humans. And so where I point people in terms of, let me share just the overall method in terms of how I think about like, and part of how I think about it is that to build that sustainability is that we're motivating, focusing, and managing our effort. So the method is really around becoming more consciously ambitious by aligning our right ambitions at the right time with the right effort. And when I say right, I don't mean there's a right or wrong in terms of those of us outside kind of looking out at you and saying, hey, that's the wrong thing to do, or no. It's really about discerning what is really right for you at this time. And so when I talk about, how do you keep yourself sustained? It's like, well, do I have the energy for what I'm pursuing? Am I motivated by it? Do I naturally have positive energy to it? And then am I not trying to do everything at once, but am I really focusing on what matters now so that I can, put my time, effort, and energy in what really is critical right now? And then importantly, on the energy side is to just recognize that, we go between two states as humans, using our energy and needing to restore it. And really, that goes beyond just sleep, and really recognizing that it is a critical thing to recognize that we actually do have to be thoughtful about, am I really doing things that will help sustain me so that I can, do all of what I want to do, both in the short term and in the long term.
And is that sort of a work-life balance thing, or are there other ways to think about, things that will feed you and re-energize you?
Yeah, I appreciate this. So one of the things I'll just say is, like, I personally don't love the term work-life balance just from a term perspective. And it's
Yeah.
like, I of course want what everybody wants when they use that term. I want for them whatever they want to say, like that end state is that they want. But my only concern about the term is that word balance, well, the whole term, one is that it makes people think that they should always be in equilibrium, like 50-50, and that's rarely the case. And
Yeah.
also that it should always be steady. Oh, I'm going to get it right. And then I don't never have to think about it again, but it
Right.
always gets
Is
thrown
it?
off, right? Yeah. Or that there should be hard boundaries between them. And that's also not realistic. And especially these days, given how we work. And so I also, frankly, don't like that work comes first in that term because I think it is a mindset thing, and it can trigger us. So I do think that, I think you're right that it goes beyond just I think in how you were asking the question, oh, is it just a work-life balance thing? I think it does go beyond that. And part of that, I think, is, well, let me keep it a little more focused here, which is, in terms of, well, I think what's embedded in your question is kind of like, am I allowing for those things in my life that are important to actually get some time and attention? Because I think that it's very easy in today's world for work to take over. And so part of it is, well, am I investing time and energy into those things that will fuel me, will, fulfill me, et cetera? And I think that I talk about having life ambitions as opposed to just work ambitions, because I think ambition, oftentimes we think it is just about work, but, hey, you can have life ambitions, which, by the way, most of us do already. We just don't claim that. And so I like to point people, when I do talk about sustaining, to being, discerning about what works for them. So it really is, again, a personal thing, and I can go into more detail, but I think I talk about what are those things that restore, protect, and support your energy, and really getting clear on those different aspects that contribute to that.
Yeah. Well, I also brought it up from the perspective of, a lot of the listeners are entrepreneurs, and sometimes we get that energy from aspects of our business, right? There's parts of it that we really find like exciting and they really fuel us. And then there's other parts that, suck.
Totally, Christine. So I think, okay, yeah. So I appreciate you noting this, because I think this gets back to the personalization of it. I think this is why it's so important to tap into one's self-knowledge, or to pause to reflect, to kind of understand, well, what does energize me versus what drains me,
Yeah.
and to understand for yourself. So for example, a good friend of mine, I remember talking with him during the pandemic, and he was saying how, you know, just sitting at home and relaxing, was not the thing that was actually going to restore him. What
Right.
he actually needed, he's like, I get energized when I'm out talking to interesting people.
Mm.
And coming out of the pandemic, he's like, I can't keep sitting at home. I have to get out. It's even something for myself. Like I recognize for myself, like if I work from home all the time, I don't feel good. Like
Yeah.
I like the flexibility. I like not having to commute, but it was happening just again this week. I'm like, why am I not feeling good? I'm like, because you're not getting yourself out of the house. You're not getting into a different environment. And so, you need to tune into like what is going to drive your energy. And that is different for each of us. Now, there's some, scientific things that people will say, right? Like, we kind of know like generally passive activities like just sitting and watching TV or scrolling social media don't energize us or restore us, I should say, as much as say getting your mind off of things and like or engaging in an activity,
Yeah.
so there are some things of that nature.
But yeah, you're absolutely right, because some people, members of my family, and I'm not, and not my, like, not like my, I don't have kids or whatever, but like my cousins, when we get together for family reunions, they really love to, I mean, I guess I would call it arguing, but it's maybe debating, but they just love that, and they look forward to it, and they just, are excited to have like a topic where they can really just, bandy about and, hear everybody's opinion. And, I guess it is like a debate. And so, maybe you'll say, oh, I really need a good argument, like brings to mind Monty Python. I came here for an argument. No, you didn't. That's not it, right. So that whole thing, um, you're, I'm kind of relating to the idea of what you're saying, that you need to stop and be a little bit honest with yourself and not assume that what gets you energized and excited is the same thing that, maybe you read about it on YouTube, or not you read on YouTube, but anyway, that you heard that this was a good idea and then you try it. That didn't do it. Well, what is going to energize me? What is going to make me, I mean, I love to learn things. That's the big thing that gets me excited and, fired up. I love to travel. I love to hear things and learn things. And whenever I feel sort of like blah, I'll be like, you should just go take a Coursera course because you'll feel so much better, right? So, or go take a course out in the world, being out with others. So, how do you help people to identify what really energizes them and what's going to be the fuel that they need to kind of make their goals sustainable, or their activities, I guess?
Well, one of the things I advise that people do is create a sustaining plan. And I have people reflect on like, what are those things, as I mentioned, that are going to restore, protect, and support your energy. And so, like, look back at a calendar. Of your, or just reflect back on your last week. And I point people towards their calendar because typically, right, people have calendar. A
Everything's in
lot of
there.
us have, yeah, and everything's in there. And you can kind of think about like and reflect back. Okay, what were those experiences? What was happening? Where was I getting restored? And what's or across those three different areas. And what's helpful about that too is like often people start to recognize and say like, oh, I actually am doing more than I thought I was doing. So that's even helpful for people to
Yeah.
acknowledge. But then you can start to become a little bit more self-aware around both what are those things that are energizing me, what are those things that are draining me as well, and being really clear about that, and then being intentional about, okay, well, what might I do going forward? Now, if people are still like, but I don't know, I still, there maybe one of those areas is empty. Well, then there's an opportunity there to try things out, right? I do innovation work as well. So I say prototype it, try something and then see, then after you've experimented with it, pause, reflect, what happened? Was there a positive effect? Did it not stick for you? And then if that doesn't work, you try again. There's no harm in trying things, but I think that it does often take that actually experimenting with things to be able
Mhm.
to see whether it's going to work for you, and let that be okay if it doesn't, and try to do something else. Another thing that a lot of people talk about is like just being clear on like keep a joy list, keep a list of things that really do make you happy, or small things that you can do to shift your energy and to bring bright spots into your day. So there are a lot of different practices like that that can help people.
And how about the drains? How do you help people deal with the drains?
Mm. I think there's a couple of different things there. One is to you do have to look at what some of those things are, right? To determine whether or not, because where I would first go to people to say to people is like, well, what might be a step you can take to actually eliminate that drain? That's something that's draining you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet, sometimes we have to do things that are a little unpleasant. Right. So even for our ambitions, I know, darn, right? So even for our ambitions, if you think about it, not everything that we put hard work into that we really care about, that we have some determination or a commitment to go and achieve something or pursue something for our lives, not all of it is going to be fun and games. So if you think about like an athlete training or a musician practicing, doing scales or doing sprints, like it's not always enjoyable, but that is a fundamental practice that is required for you to meet your overall goal. And so I think there is some level of acceptance of some of these things. But otherwise, you can also look at, well, is this something that I can just subtract? Is it something I actually really have to be doing? We tend to, as humans, we have a bias to adding. So sometimes it's even just challenging. Could I actually just subtract this? Or can you outsource it? Can you have somebody else do it for you? And then if that's not possible and it's still something you must do, then what I might suggest is to link it. One of the things I write about in the book is this idea of tapping into our motivators and linking things to our motivators. And if it's a drainer, one of the things that we can do is to attempt or see, is there a way for me to bring in something I actually love doing, something that makes a process a little bit more enjoyable, or something that you might enjoy, into something that's a drainer, so that you can try to reverse that or actually up your motivation around it. Another thing that people can do is to connect back to your motivators to say, well, how is this thing that I'm doing that I might not be enjoying? How does it connect to this overall goal or vision I have for myself? Or how does it connect to a value that's important to me, such that you're bringing some additional meaning to what you're doing? And by doing that, it does help, like around things that stress us out, even. And I know that's not what you're saying around a drainer, but there has been research that shows when you do that, it actually, by bringing that meaning in, it can help reduce those feelings of stress. It reminds you, well, here's why this is important to me.
Can you give us an example of like what you were saying of bringing in something pleasant to kind of to augment something that's kind of a drainer?
Sure. I mean, a really simple one is like that I'll use for myself. Like, I'll just admit I'm not the best housekeeper. And so, like, when I clean, I tend to listen to podcasts because I, like you, Christine, like one of my biggest values is learning and growth. And so, if I can combine something that I enjoy doing, learning through listening to podcasts, to something I'm not as keen in doing. Cleaning is not something that fulfills me or energizes me, it drains me. Then that's something that can be combined and I can, enjoy it a bit more. Another thing that I might do is around, I don't typically listen to music as something that is enjoyable for me when I am doing work. But if I'm doing something like my expenses, which is not something that I really necessarily enjoy doing, I may listen to music as an additional thing that I might do during that time to try to make that experience more enjoyable. But you could even do something like, imagine doing like there is some work that you don't really want to do. Um, and imagine, like, as in writing my book, I did writing sprints with the community I'm in. And all we did was gather together as a community, got on the call, said hello, turned off our cameras, put ourselves on mute. All of us worked together, and then we came back, said goodbye, and went on. And it makes a difference to be doing that in community. So imagine if you had either a community or a team where you're kind of like, hey, we have this not so fun thing that we have to do, but we're going to do it all together. And we're just going to work quietly and schedule a time to do that together. Even doing something like that, and starting the meeting with something that's fun and priming yourselves in a way that actually could get you into a different mindset, and then closing and like maybe even just celebrating being done with this thing could be a way to kind of bring some lightheartedness or more joy or fun to something that might be something that you're not really thrilled to be doing.
That's a great idea. the difference between, sewing by yourself at home and being part of a quilting bee, just to come up with an example that for some random reason popped into my head, right? It's a whole different experience. It turns it into a community and fun sort of thing. You've got that energy, even if nobody's talking, right? You've still got
Mhm.
that energy that you're all sharing together,
Mhm.
and it's helpful.
Yeah,
Oh, great
exactly.
ideas.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
was going to ask you about the writing process. How was it writing your book? First of all, tell us all about your new book.
Oh, so my book is Sustainable Ambition: How to Prioritize What Matters to Thrive in Life and Work. And the book is for people who, let me start that again. Sorry.
Okay.
I wrote the book for people who want to be ambitious in both their professional and personal lives and are trying to figure out how to prioritize and pursue all they want to do and they're across those domains in a sustainable way. And as I've already articulated, oftentimes people think what they're searching for when they're experiencing friction around this is they're searching for work-life balance. But as I already said, like I think that's elusive. And I think what we're really trying to figure out is how do I make these choices around these conflicts I'm feeling around all that I want to pursue? And often those conflicts are coming up when something has changed on us or we're going through some significant life changes or work changes where we're having to make different choices around where we're spending our time and energy, or we're experiencing significant capacity constraints. And so, I've already shared a little bit about the method, but I really wanted in the book to offer both a mindset and a method for people to come back to and practice again and again. And it helps people define goals at any life stage, prioritize across life and work, and help people, my hope is, achieve success with a little bit more resilience.
Excellent. That's a great goal. And what sorts of people do you have a sort of I don't know if I'd call it I'm coming up with the wrong word, avatar. I was thinking paradigm, which is
Mm.
not the word I wanted. I wanted the word avatar. So do you have like an avatar of the sorts of folks that you are most likely to find success with, or people who gravitate toward you and are successful working with you?
In terms of like the application of the method, or
Yeah, I think so. Or just, in general, as far as I'm a real estate agent and I have a certain type of person
mm,
who I feel like most benefits. And by I say type, I like people who are either investing or buying their house for the first time because I'm, patient. I'm good at explaining things, and I don't care how many times they ask me questions,
mm,
right? As opposed to someone who might want to work with a person who's been investing for 50 years and just wants to that's not as fun for me, even though they might buy 25 more
mm.
properties a year. It's still not as much fun because I don't get to augment their process at all, right? So how about you? Do you have like a favorite type of client or someone you feel like, this is like real. I always find success when I work with this type of scenario.
Yeah, I think what I would say there is like this is for people who are both ambitious across both their professional and personal lives. Or, I even hesitate when I say that now as I've continued to do this work, because what I would say is just are ambitious about something in their life,
Hmm.
and the reason I take out the word term professional is because anything around that they might say is their personal, is their work, right? And so, and I just think because I've learned over time, like I think our work can represent a number of different things, and that can be in a professional realm or an unprofessional, non-professional, I should say, realm. And so, not unprofessional. And so that's why I might say that. And again, I think working with people who are tend to be at an inflection point, and so they're experiencing some shift in what they're wanting for themselves,
Yeah.
and wanting some change, and are really more planners, so this isn't, I tend not to be, I've learned over time, not as much about like, oh, I'm searching for the next job, but rather I'm looking on the horizon. I know some change is coming or some change is afoot. I'm wanting to think about what next, or I have a new ambition brewing and I want to explore what that might be.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's an exciting time, right? That's got to be fun
Hmm.
for you as well because you're working with people at a time when, right, there's all sorts of exciting, lots of energy, lots of changes happening.
Yeah, it can also be really anxiety producing. And that's
True.
part of what happens too, is that, and part of the my intention with the work that I do is my hope is to reduce some of that anxiety around these changes. And I think part of the reason I try to reclaim and redefine how we think about ambition in the work that I do is because I think that our limited view of ambition is part of the reason that causes a lot of that angst and frustration or disappointment or what have you. So I like to hopefully some of the, changing some of the narratives can help people find a little bit more peace and ease in the process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Kathy, have you always done this type of work or did you pivot yourself at some point?
I pivoted. So, and I still do a portfolio of things today. And so, yes, my career, my past life has been in branding and marketing and strategy. And I'm in some ways a generalist, but I feel like I've done a number of different things, but in the business realm, and then have shifted more into the space of also including looking at personal life and work management and kind of talent management, leadership development, adding on those areas into the kind of work that I do.
Do you feel like your marketing background comes up at all when you're helping your clients now?
You know how it comes up is, I'm just pausing to think about that. I think, one of the core, in the work that I do, there are themes that cross between like what I do on the business side and what I do on the personal side. One of those is just like often what people are going through either on the organizations and individuals is they're going through some change, right? There's some transformation or transition that they're going through. And that's what I'm partnering with them on. I think on the marketing side, what's interesting to me is what's always been important to me from a marketing lens and the lens that I champion, which is I kind of say I'm actually not a marketer. I'm a strategist, and I'm also somebody who always felt much more comfortable on the product innovation side. And part of that being because to me it's about how do we tap into people's motivations as opposed to setting expectations, and what are their needs and what are their desires, and from a product perspective, like what are we trying to deliver to meet those needs, those desires, those motivations that they have for themselves. And so that is what I would say is the marketing component that I bring to both sides of my work, which is again tapping into, well, what are those motivations that are important to individuals, and how does that get reflected? So it's a little bit different than what probably you thought I might say in terms of like, do
No,
I
I
help
like it.
people with marketing? But that's kind of how it comes up. And I think the innovation side of my marketing experience too also comes up in this exploration. And honestly, more and more, it's what I'm actually framing around some of this. It's not completely new, but this idea that like even going through changes and exploring our ambitions to me is a creative act, and it kind of follows what a similar innovation process is. And I don't think people often recognize that, and we put pressure on ourselves because of that. So,
Yeah, I want to just let you elaborate a little bit when you were saying that we have sort of a stressful or a negative connotation or expectation when it comes to ambition. Can you like what you think, how you think we relate to it, or how that kind of plays into the way that you help people?
yeah. Well, first off, I mean, oftentimes in society, we tend to have this negative connotation of ambition. I sometimes refer to Gordon Gekko from the movie Wall Street, again dating myself, who said greed is good, and that's sometimes what we think about when we think about people who are ambitious. And oftentimes women are, who are ambitious are also viewed kind of negatively. And so, you know, I I believe that ambition is good. It's part of the reason why, nothing, many things in this world are like polarities, and there's neither good nor bad, right? And so, and I like to see ambition is it is good that, we have desire. By the way, it's also natural for us humans to want things and to desire things. And
Absolutely.
so, and our ambitions is what draws us and gives us the energy to pursue what we want for ourselves. So allowing ourselves to have ambitions, I think, is really a good thing. And even just really briefly, I'll say, one of the things that I explored a bit myself last year and came to an insight, which is, you can be content and still long for new things. And so again, that desire, that ambition is not necessarily a bad thing. The other things that I think about around ambition and want to reframe things. One is, as I mentioned earlier, oftentimes we think it's just about work. And I think where it can help people is to reframe it to be like, you can have life ambitions. You can have any type of ambition. And I think the reason that can help people is oftentimes where there's consternation is when they start to feel like, oh my gosh, I have ambition. So for example, when somebody does start a family, oh, I'm shifting my focus. Oh, I'm starting to think less about work and I'm starting to think more about my family and put a time and attention there. Oh, does that mean I'm less ambitious? And what I would say is no, it just
No.
means your ambition is shifting from where you want to put that time, energy, and attention. And I think that instead of feeling that angst around that, if we can let go of that a little bit, the other one that's a corollary to that is this idea that I believe ambitions ebb and flow over time, and that it's not necessarily, yes, from a scientific perspective, like it's a character trait, but that it can go up and down. And so to allow ourselves that freedom that, oh, there's going to be times when I really want to be leaning in, and there's other times when it's okay for me to not, to actually slow down my pace or not even want to be pursuing something right now. And again, why that can be helpful is that oftentimes people define themselves as I am ambitious, and it's this trait. And then again, when they start to want to slow down, they see it as a ding against themselves, as opposed to like, I believe through the work that I've done, I kind of, it's not overly scientific, but I do believe through the many people I've talked with that we have different states of ambition. And I think that's very normal.
Absolutely. And as you say, when you're in the process of shifting, right? If one particular project is no longer, you don't, maybe it's to a point where you don't need to be that ambitious about it because it's already kind of plateauing and you're just kind of waiting for something else to get excited about, like that's okay, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. So this is cool. I'm surprised how fast the time's going by.
It's
So
gone by.
now it's time for me to ask you, is there anything, Kathy, that you wish I would have asked you that we haven't touched on yet?
Hmm. Well, maybe we've touched on this a bit, but I think I just want to underscore it, which
Yeah.
is around pursuing our ambitions and even, this idea of life work integration. It's just, I'd encourage people. One of the things that was a big lesson for me in my research around this book, and it came through in particular in speaking with academics who are researching us humans beings, was that just to remember that we are human and that we have these natural tendencies that I think we are often fighting against. And so to have compassion for ourselves as we go through this journey of life. And I think that's just an important lesson to carry through as we, try to pursue what we want for our lives.
And that's actually the perfect way to wrap this up because before we started the recording, we were talking about giving each other grace. And now we're talking about giving ourselves grace, which is perfect.
Exactly.
Excellent. Kathy, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks so much for having me, Christine. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you, listeners, for listening. We are really glad that you were here to join us today. And now, why don't you just take a couple minutes and think of someone else who would be glad to hear this conversation today? Somebody who you think could benefit. Maybe somebody who's struggling with that exact thought of, am I in the right place in my life? Am I doing the right things? Am I putting the right energy in the right places? And they will thank you, and we will thank you. In the meantime, have a fabulous week.